And I think I want to start from the outset by saying that nothing that happened today with the letter from the U.S. Department of Education was a surprise. I said in debate or in questions on the bill that I expected us to lose the waiver. The reason is, and this is what's frustrating, and I think the reason you had such pushback from the public on Common Core is there's really two sets of standards here that the federal government wants to apply to the state. If you want to come up with your own standards, then you're going to. Then Secretary Duncan said, we want you to have internationally benchmarked standards and college and career-ready standards. That's interesting because Common Core is neither one of those two things. The requirement they give us is that our system of higher education certify the standards of college career ready. You won't need remediation. Well, Common Core doesn't have that as a proof. So
Common Core is about uniformity, and it flies in the face of what our founders intended when they put the 10th Amendment into place, and that was that each state was to be a laboratory of experimentation where you could learn from the success and failure of states and adjust state policy in accordance. And if we look at a true leader on education, I'm aware that Massachusetts is being spoken about a lot. If you look at NAEP scores, they're 20 points to 15 points higher than many states. If you look at ACT scores, they're 4 or 5 points higher than many states. And we need to be looking at states that have a proven 20-year history, not a grand experiment on a national level, which is what Common Core was going to predicate in the classroom. And I would also just add to that, I saw Governor Jindal's comments today. He was talking about the co-opting by the federal government. Make no mistake, Common Core was not state-led. Common Core was something that was pushed by the NGA, and it was brought back into the states. But Oklahoma, the history of us getting into this and launching into this grant experiment, had everything to do about financial gain in a cash-strapped era, and the ability to get $5 billion more, race to the top, grant access. The states that began to launch into this thing when it was in draft form, Oklahoma was one of those in 2010, which predates me as a legislator, many of us at the Capitol. And what Representative Nelson and I were doing in this is to get Oklahoma out of the entrapment. And I'll yield with one statement. President Barack Obama in his 2013 State of the Union address said, and I'm quoting exactly, 4 years ago we started Race to the Top, a competition that convinced almost every state to develop smarter curricula and higher standards. Oklahomans need to know this was about control of education policy.
Well, I think the big deal is the fact that you've got the federal government trying to exert this kind of control. In terms of what practically is going to change here as a result of that, I think is not a big deal. I think not much is changing. There is no loss of money. They're not even required to set aside of the 20% of the Title I funds for use by parents to do the tutoring that we talked about. So I think it's really a non-event event.
What we're talking about, No Child Left Behind waiver, in more specific terms, is called the ESEA flexibility waiver, and that's Elementary Secondary Education Act flexibility. And it's important to point that out. The term flexibility is, in all practical purposes, ridiculous. What's billed as flexibility is about control. When you look at the 7 points on the Oklahoma waiver, we surrendered without any modification, in addition to a common set of standards, with this case, i.e. Common Core, 2009 TLE, without any modification. What we did on RSA without modification this last year. What we did A through F in 2011. So for those that believe that we have to have the ability as a state to make adjustments like we saw in some of those education policy decisions, the waiver put us in a predicament where we were having to ask the federal government during this process of a renewal, may we change? May we promote a child by allowing parents and teachers to be involved in that process? May we not allow quantitative to adjust a teacher's success in a classroom? The state of Washington lost their waiver simply over the TLE. This is a fight that had to be picked. Common Core was the initial entity, but make no mistake, what we're doing on quantitative was going to happen, and we had to stand up to the bully now, or the bully was going to drive us even further into federal control.